Hey, it's Soul giving you guys the World of Warcraft, and today I wanted to talk about a new development regarding legendaries in the 7.15 patch. On the 13th of December, Josh Allen aka Lore made a statement on the WoW forums. He reiterated some stuff that was said by Ian Hezekiah in the most previous Q&A that certain legendaries were just way too good, way too powerful, and it's something that they wanted to address. And in a kind of surprising but kind of expected turn, they're going to do that. In an upcoming PTR build, throughput legendaries, like, the ones that do more stabby or maybe healing into, well, throughput based legendaries, they're gonna get nerfed. To compensate for that, classes or specs that feel really dependent on legendaries to feel competitive or viable or however you want to see it, they're going to be compensated appropriately. So I guess numbers are going to be changed up in some way, shape, or form. Overall, I think that's a good change. I think that legendaries shouldn't be so prominent that they've got to be like the must-have for a certain class or spec. Right now, they're at a point where like a certain throughput legendary is viable or actually, just really, really good in every situation, and that's something that Blizzard wants to go away from. They basically want to shift prominence away from these legendary items and focus it more on, more important stuff like let's say your artifact weapon, for example. Obviously, I'm not here to talk about exactly what kind of changes are going to happen. We haven't seen a build yet, and there might be one coming in today, but I couldn't even wait to talk about that because, to be honest, that's not really what I wanted to get into. I'll probably do that maybe in a separate video. What I'm interested or concerned or more passionate about is the design behind these legendaries themselves, the items, the system, well, okay, mostly the system. And I wanted to talk a little bit, like, no script or nothing this time, but I just wanted to go over a little bit on how we got to where we are today. So it was a little bit over a year ago when they announced Legion at Gamescom, and then a couple months later they got into details over at BlizzCon. They were talking about, oh, it'd be cool to get like a super awesome item, just killing boars out in the open field, and all of a sudden you get like the best item in the game. They wanted to kind of bring that feeling back to players. Immediately, of course, it was met with excitement as well as skepticism over, oh, well, I'm not going to get this stuff. It's like such a rare drop. I'm going to have to kill boars for like 20 hours to get any of these things. As time went on, Blizzard got into some of the details of these legendaries, including, just what these legendaries are, where they're actually going to drop from, and systems like bad luck protection. Throughout the alpha and the beta, players were already a little bit concerned, and they voiced it to Blizzard, talking about the drop rate being too low and the kinds of social nuances that are bound to happen with a system like this being in place in the live game. Of course, those kinds of perspectives are thrown off. This is coming from the PTR, and there are only certain kinds of players that not just participate in the PTR but give actual feedback. You're not going to get a great sample of how casual players are going to feel when you're taking your inputs from certain kinds of players. That's just kind of a flaw, but oh well. When Legion finally did launch, that's when the complaints from players talking about the drop rate, that's when it really started pouring in. And at least in my opinion, it's exacerbated by social media, forums, and things like that create a sort of echo chamber. It's like, hey, I didn't get this thing, and another person's like, oh, well, I didn't get it either, and a third person's like, oh, well, I got the crappy one, and so on and so forth. It just kind of bounces around. And meanwhile, there's a very large subset of the population that just doesn't talk. They don't really care. They're just playing the game. They're not taking a look at videos. They're not taking a look at forums and patch notes and what have you. And it's been going on pretty much every day with the vocal community, and most notably with some of the higher tier raiders. Players were questioning their ability to maintain their self-control or blaming Blizzard for not reining in self-control. And went as far as having the game director go out on Thanksgiving Day to clarify certain things regarding a legendary soft cap, where you can only earn so many legendaries at a time before the bad luck protection system that was originally in place, it's disabled. And that whole disabling of the system is gone now as well. So here we are now in this kind of weird place where these throughput legendaries are about to go through a very big change. From a high level overview, it's kind of nice that most classes and specs are effectively going to get a buff, while these items are going to get a nerf. I think I can say with pretty good confidence that there are a lot of players that don't have their best in slot legendaries, and hopefully when 7.15 drops, then that's going to be less of an issue because they're going to feel, they're going to feel a little bit better. Meanwhile, people with legendaries are still probably going to perform a little bit better than their counterparts without the legendaries, but I'm sure that there are a number of players that feel really hurt by this change. These are the players that were really being pressured into farming these legendaries, otherwise they lose their spot. And at least in my opinion, I don't think there are a huge number of players that were literally pressured to do that, but I'm sure that doesn't take away from the frustration. Like, you farmed hundreds of mythic keystone dungeons and did all this and you finally got your stuff, and now it's not that big of a deal. That kind of sucks. As players and armchair designer, I don't even have my armrest. As players and armchair designers, it's really easy for us to say that, oh yeah, the design of legendaries, oh, terrible. We could have done this, we could have done that, and it would have been so much better. Mistakes were made. I do agree with a lot of players and with Ian when the whole concept of legendary items changing throughput or increasing throughput for the most part, that wasn't a very good plan. It literally does create a goal that feels necessary to the player that they have no control of reaching. The whole excitement of obtaining that legendary, which is something that Blizzard tooted early on, is offset by the many, many more moments that you don't get it. Meanwhile, there are your compatriots or counterparts or whatever you want to call it, they're earning them all around you. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where everyone is going to be happy from someone else's good fortune. Instead, they kind of turn someone else's good fortune into our misfortune because, well, we didn't get anything. And it's not for us or Blizzard or anyone to say what should make us happy or not, regardless of even how much I try to bridge that understanding in a lot of my videos about legendaries. I think that the design of legendaries would have been cool if they did in fact just go away from the throughput aspect and stick with like utilities. And while the legendary system is very disconnected from the rest of the game, like you could literally lift the whole thing and just take it away because the rest of the game isn't designed around possessing legendaries. But when it does come to game design, you don't really do that. You just kind of push forward and try to adapt as best as you can. So for Blizzard to do a general nerf on these throughput legendaries and compensate by increasing the throughput of classes and specs, assuming that that actually works, I think that's the best course of action. There are opinions out there that all the legendaries should have some sort of throughput increase, so that way all of them are bumped up to acceptable levels. And that sounds okay, but then you still have to consider that there are a lot of players that just don't have a lot or maybe any legendaries at all. What you have then is a further increasing gap between players that do and don't have legendaries. It exacerbates the feeling of helplessness because, you know, one player is more lucky than another, or one player, you know, farms the crap out of stuff while another just doesn't do that. And that's not going to be a very good feeling between players, and unfortunately these players do in fact play together. However, the design approach of the legendary system, without really having any good words for it, it was pretty much up to this point a failure. And here's why. Ian had said in that earlier Q&A, like I said before, that if they could do it all over again, they would have stuck with utility-based legendaries. That's cool. Why didn't you do that before? I don't know. But here's the thing about legendaries that only provide utilities, such as like bubbles or run speed or, you know, stuff like that. When you have a system like this where you have certain slots that you can fill with certain things, you know, like legendary gear, and the purpose of them is to fill a certain niche, like, hey, I need to reduce damage for this particular fight. I need to run faster for this particular fight. You've also got to consider previous systems that you have access to. Maybe I'm reaching, maybe this is hyperbole, but if you only have like 2 slots of something that you can swap out, how is that different from like a talent tree with only, you know, with only 2 slots and a bunch of things to choose from? Even worse, remember Inscription, how back in Warlords they had glyphs that actually did things and now they only do cosmetic things? If there are only utility-based legendaries, how is that different from major glyphs? But instead of having 3 slots that are permanent, that are easily craftable, you have these 2 slots that are, you know, that consist of these legendary glyph things that are super hard to find because it's based on a system of luck. So in the end, based on Ian's statement, we've pretty much gone full circle on the design retrospective. That basically major glyphs became legendaries. I'm a little torn, I'm a little confused about the system, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on what do you think of the kind of turnaround that this whole legendary system has taken. If I can easily throw it together, I'll try to make a video going over all the different kinds of legendary changes that are going to happen, as well as the compensation to classes, if that's going to go through in the next build. But for now, thanks for coming. Share your thoughts on this topic and, well, stay breezy, guys. Hey, baby guy.